We begin this morning with the U.S. House of Representatives ousting of Republican Kevin McCarthy from his post of Speaker.
On this vote, the yeas are 216, the nays are 210. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
It is the first time in history that a sitting Speaker has been removed. His replacement is not yet known, but Patrick McHenry has been named to step in as temporary Speaker. The vote was called by a member of McCarthy's own party, Matt Gaetz, from Florida after he accused the Republican Party leader of not doing enough to cut federal spending. The vote comes just days after Congress narrowly averted a government shutdown. Gaetz was one of a dozen Republicans who repeatedly voted against McCarthy's bid for Speaker in January.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A1 of Rule 9, I rise to give notice of my intent to raise a question of the privileges of the House. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A1 of Rule 9, I rise to give notice of my intent to raise a question of the privileges of the House. Declaring the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives to be vacant. Resolved that the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives is hereby declared to be vacant.
A number of Democrats right now are saying the same thing, that they don't trust him.
The one thing we have in common is he's lied to all of us.
A handshake deal right now. If you were to move forward, if there were to be any kind of agreement, what would that look like, and what would you need to see from the Speaker at this moment?
I think the die is cast based on the motion I just filed. I think the time for that discussion would have been over the last several weeks, but instead we saw the Speaker continuing to, the Speaker did not just fail to remediate the breach of the agreement he made with us in January, he accelerated the instances of breach. Like, after I laid out the breach, he went and violated the 72-hour rule. After I laid out the breach, he violated the $100 million no amendment suspension rule. So he seems to be reverting to the very unfortunate muscle memory of Washington, D.C. that has put our nation atop a $33 trillion debt that has led to $2 trillion annual deficits in our near future.
Ousted Speaker McCarthy insists that he has no regrets for choosing government over grievance. He says that he will not run again for Speaker.
Doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it is necessary. I don't regret standing up for choosing governance over grievance. It is my responsibility. It is my job. I do not regret negotiating. Our government is designed to find compromise. I don't regret my efforts to build coalitions and find solutions. I was raised to solve problems, not create them. So I may have lost a vote today, but as I walk out of this chamber, I feel fortunate to have served the American people. You need 218. Unfortunately, 4% of our conference can join all the Democrats and dictate who can be the Republican Speaker in this House. I don't think that rule is good for the institution, but apparently I'm the only one. I believe I can continue to fight, maybe in a different manner. I will not run for Speaker again. I'll have the conference pick somebody else.
Willens, a professor at Princeton University, says Kevin McCarthy's ouster from the position of Speaker is part of a coup d'etat by Donald Trump.
Well, it's the first time that a sitting speaker's ever been ousted, so it's unprecedented in that sense. There have been earlier moments in American history where there's been a great deal of trouble electing a speaker. Particularly around the 1850s, there was a great deal of trouble there, and votes, finally getting people in the chair. It's a sign, I think, if history is any guide at all to this, it's a sign of a party in disintegration. That's what's happening, and it's melting down, and that's pretty clear. That's the older history. The more recent history, I think, is that what we're seeing today is the latest installment in the, ever continuing coup d'etat by Donald Trump. That's what we're seeing. And it's pretty clear that he's the hidden hand in a lot of this stuff that's been going on, that I think probably the next step would be a shutdown, which is really what they're probably aiming for. They wanted to get McCarthy out of there in part because he stood in the way of that. Bunch of reasons, but that's part of it. And it's the politics of chaos. And I do think this is a triumph for Donald Trump. Anytime that you have the order being overthrown, I mean, he's managing to do now what he couldn't do in January 6th with his takeover of the House of Representatives, and doing it with his own people. You don't have to have crazy shamans with crazy horns doing it. You can do it with Matt Gaetz from the Freedom Caucus to the MAGA people. It's been the same thing, which is the hard right of the Republican Party has overthrown in one way or another one speaker after another. Force him to resign, as in the case of Boehner. This is the politics of cannibalism, which even Gingrich didn't like. They're eating their own, and the Republican Party a long time ago, really in the early 90s, decided that it was going to be able to take on this crazy kind of politics and be able to ride it to victory all of the time. And it would never catch up with them, but it caught up with them with Trump in a big way. My guess is that they'll try to find someone else who will command the respect of the entire Republican caucus and put it through, ram it through. But that's only the prelude. That will be only the prelude to what I think is their ultimate idea, which is to shut down the government and blame it on Biden. Try to blame it on Biden, and not even that. I mean, just shut it down. I mean, we're sort of at Batman politics here. I mean, this is kind of like the Joker. I mean, it's beyond anything that I'm capable of talking about, because I only talk about the past and history, and it's never been like this before. But there is a certain nihilistic quality to what they're doing. However, there's also genius in the madness, because the madness is about creating as much chaos as possible, and then then the Trump people will step in. McCarthy was in an impossible position, but in the end, he is going to. He does vaguely believe in the country, and he believes in politics up to a point, but then he wasn't going to go that far at the very last minute over the weekend. He brokered the deal. Look, there are a lot of other reasons that are going on here that are personal as well as political. I mean, there's an ethics investigation of Matt Gaetz going on here about things that he was let off from in the courts, but the House Ethics Committee has a higher standard. I mean, he'd love to get rid of that, and getting rid of McCarthy may have been a way to do that as well. There's many scenarios within scenarios going on here. If this is a prelude to shutdown, historically shutdowns have not been very productive for the party that shuts down the Congress. I mean, this happened in the 90s, which is really the beginning of this history in some ways with Gingrich. And, the Republicans unleashed Gingrich thinking that he would do a good job against the Democrats. And then he decided to take the whole country down with him with two shutdowns that basically reelected Bill Clinton in 1996. So if you're going back on that precedent, if I was a Democrat, I'd say go ahead. The only problem is that we have to live with the effects of a government shutdown, which are very, very dire. And you don't want that to happen. You don't want to be the party that benefits from that, because everybody's going through a disaster. Much worse now even than in the 90s.
Will Enseh from Princeton giving his thoughts on the going-ons in the House of Representatives in the U.S. Rufai.
Pure and simple, this is what happens to you when you keep giving appeasers meat and you hope they'll eat you last. Who popularized that quote? I think it was Winston Churchill, and said many years ago that appeaser is the person that gives the crocodile meat and hopes they'll eat him last. Prior to this time, McCarthy said all the right things, but because he wanted position, he started appeasing the Donald Trump base, the MAGA base. McCarthy was a House of Rep member that came up in the House to say that he totally condemns the January 6th incident, and President Trump should have taken responsibility. Then he was minority leader. When the race for who was going to be the leader of the House started, the Speaker of the House, what did he do? He went ahead to start kowtowing to the likes of the Trumps of this world and other major MAGA movements, people, the likes of the Matt Gaetz and other people out there. He did everything. In fact, he went to Mar-a-Lago to seek Trump's support. And they gave him the support on the condition that we are going to control you one way or the other. So he knew what he was in for, because you remember the vote for who was going to be Speaker went on and on and on before they finally had a breakthrough. He knew what he was in for. And once he got in there, they started to control him. They wanted more cuts, like the cuts you're seeing on Ukraine. They wanted more budget cuts and the likes and all of that. And they pushed him. They pushed him to do everything in the book to favor them. In fact, they pushed him to start this impeachment, rigmarole now, against President Biden. They pushed him to that. They pushed him to do all sorts. But the thing about appeasers, and that's why you must stand up tall for yourself, is that there is nothing you give them that is ever going to be enough. And in this case, nothing was enough for them. And when Trump was done with him, all he just needed to do was institute a coup in the House, push his people like Matt Gaetz, and before you know it, Speaker McCarthy was out. The last time this happened was in 1910 in America, in the case of Cannon, but that didn't fall through. But this was actually reality. And furthermore, because the people that ought to help him, he reneged against them. This was the same Speaker McCarthy that went on Sunday morning shows in America to berate the Democrats as regards passing the final bill, that prevented the government shutdown. He said, the Democrats were not ready to work with him. When in fact, it was the Democrats that pushed for that bill to be passed as a compromise bill. But what did he do? He berated them. Now he needed the Democrats. He couldn't get them. That's why they voted 216 to 210. So the Democrats were not ready to speak up for him because he berated them in the first place. So he got no support. The House now has to put in a pro tem speaker of some sort, Patrick McHenry. Till they finally get somebody, the voting process will start. They wanted to shut the government down before, but what is happening now is that the House shut down pretty much. And this debacle continues. Who are they going to have as the next speaker? Some of the Republicans have pushed Donald Trump forward because the American law does not say you have to be a member of the House of Reps before you can be a speaker. But we know that's a long shot now because of what Donald Trump is facing in his own regard. But the best candidates for the Speaker of the House will be an Hakeem Jeffries that is very bipartisan, although it will be a hard sell because he's Democrat and the Republicans have majority in the House. But Hakeem Jeffries is very bipartisan across board, and he had a good showing in the last speaker race. Time will tell. Lesson learned.
All right.
Okay, the Republicans have a 4-seat majority in the House of Representatives. And so that 4-seat majority, would they now be able to get their own person back onto that seat? Now, McCarthy lost out. You recall that when he was to emerge as a speaker in January, it took 14 rounds of voting before he finally emerged. And he had to make quite a number of compromises before he got there. And since then, the Republicans in the House have been divided right down the middle. And so he's a victim of that division within the Republican Party in the House of Representatives. And the fact also that those people who did not want him there in January are the ones who have been able to take him out this time around. Yes, in 1910, Speaker Cannon faced a similar situation, but he survived. But he became a very weak speaker. He's not one of those speakers of the U.S. House of Representatives that is remembered for having made much difference. But in this particular case, McCarthy's gavel has been taken away from him. And the Democrats, they had a meeting. They could have saved him if they wanted to. But the resolution at the meeting they had was that, look, allow the Republicans to do what they like with their person. And hence, he lost his gavel. But even the people who removed him, who voted against him, in an unusual fashion, each one of them standing up and voting, which is not the ordinary procedure for the removal of a Speaker of the House of Representatives, even if it is unprecedented, because this is the first time it will happen that the Speaker of the House of Representatives of the United States will be removed. His gavel will be taken away from him. So they are also confused. There is no clear favorite. Nobody has any idea who is going to be next. And this confusion, if you like, call it chaos, is coming at a time when they have just about 40 days to prevent a government shutdown. So the drama in the U.S. House of Representatives now will be getting a new speaker and also making sure, that government is not shut down. Well, what should be noted is that Kevin McCarthy says he's not going to run. I mean, if he wants to run again to test his luck, he can. But he says he's no longer interested. Okay, so that's the situation right now. I don't think that the Speaker, the North Carolina Speaker, McCarthy, who has been put there as interim Speaker, he himself has not expressed any kind of interest. But what you see here is just politics. Just as we play politics here in Nigeria, they play politics also elsewhere. It's just the nature of it that is different. Just as there is division in the House of Reps in the United States, they face a similar division in the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom, where Suella Braverman yesterday, almost stole the show at the Conservative Party conference, indicating that there's also division. So politicians will always be politicians, whether it's in the UK or in the United States or here in Nigeria. But it's interesting to see that process playing out, and Kevin McCarthy losing his gavel. But he has not lost his seat. He remains a member of the House of Representatives.
Yes, well, just 9 months in, he has made history as the first Speaker in the U.S. House of Representatives to be ousted. And again, I think what's even more significant is that it's coming from his own party, also reflecting the state of the party in the House. And one of the things I must mention is that with the temporary Speaker, who is actually an ally of McCarthy himself, that's Patrick McHenry, his powers are limited, so barely administrative. He only will be able to recess the House, adjourn the chamber, and recognize Speaker nominations. And so he's going to midwife the process through which the next Speaker of the House will be elected. Now, they've said that they're looking at next week, a date next week. Some people are proposing the 11th of October as a date because, again, because this has never happened, they are charting on, they are on territories that they haven't yet, gone through. So it's really quite interesting, even in American politics, and a number of things to watch, because again, it might very well set precedents in terms of how these issues are handled. It's important to note that the reason why Patrick McHenry emerged as temporary Speaker or interim Speaker was because, as part of the House rules in the House of Representatives in the US, the Speaker would nominate some members of his party who would, in the event that he would not be in office, take over. And the first in line is Patrick McHenry, who stood up for him when some far-right, far-right members had kicked against his or opposed his nomination as Speaker 9 months ago. Now, moving forward, in terms of some names that have been thrown up, Matt Gaetz had alluded or mentioned the second in command, second highest office holder in the House, in the party, and that is the person of Stephen Scalise. Interestingly, Stephen Scalise had announced a few months back that he was battling blood cancer, but that he was fine, he was detected early, and that he could still carry on. He's now said that in different circles to have thrown in his hat in the ring to be Speaker of the House, and also showing that his health wouldn't be a challenge. Again, Matt Gaetz has also, alluded to the fact that him being, having that condition should not stop him. He's more credible a candidate than McCarthy is, and he will be backing him as well for Speaker. There are a few other names have been thrown up. Of course, nothing concrete yet, because of course it's still too early, and it's novel in American political history in terms of a Speaker being removed and what then happens the days afterwards. The challenge here has already been established is that it would slow down processes. The passage of some important bills in the House, some have complained, have talked about the fact that it wouldn't happen in the next few days because McHenry's powers are limited. Also, McHenry has already started work. He had asked former Speaker Nancy Pelosi to vacate her office, office complex, saying that it would be needed for the next Speaker to use. And again, this is not making him very popular, as she had mentioned that during her own time, she had ensured that the previous Speaker had enjoyed the use of offices and just that respect and the like. So a few things going on, showing perhaps very significantly the division from the far right, the moderate, and those who are just in between. We're going to see how this will pan out in the next few days. Again, it's breaking news breaking news from yesterday into this morning, and to see who might very well emerge as Speaker, and if it would strengthen, as was purported by Mr. Willens there, Donald Trump's power in the House and what the impact of that on his presidential ambitions, his nomination by the party to be candidate and then hope perhaps emerge as president in next year's US elections. Move on to our next story. In Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu has named Balarabe Abbas Lawal as a ministerial nominee from Kaduna State. He replaces former Kaduna Governor Nasir El-Rufai, who failed his screening at the Senate. Lawal was the secretary to the government of Kaduna State. President Tinubu is also asking the Senate to confirm the nominations of Jamila Bio Ibrahim from Kwara State as Minister of Youth Development and Ayodele Olawande from Ondo State as Minister of State for Youth Development. Rufai, more nominations?
Yeah, I mean, more nominations. We've been watching this for a while. Some names had to be replaced because we all know what happened. Some of them did not pass through the screening and all of that. But it just goes back to the conversation of a very bloated size of government. So in one respect, government is saying Nigerians should hold and tighten their belts. But in the other respect, we're having a very bloated size of ministers. In fact, the most ministers we've had in a while in this country. So what kind of government do we want to form that way? Can't we have that level of scrutiny, integrity, and efficiency? In the end, who does most of the work? The permanent secretary in the ministry and the other people that administer things. So we have a big size of government. And recently the Senate has also come out to say that all these new spendings the president is announcing, isn't it time for him to send a supplementary budget forward? Because that's a big question. Because it goes back to the point, I think Dr. Abati raised it yesterday, as regards all of these new announcements of 35,000 or adding 10,000, 25,000 award for workers. On whose account is that money going to come from? How are we going to appropriate the spending? So vis-a-vis all of this, now we're still talking about humongous spending as regards ministers. So let us watch it critically, but congratulations to them. Hope they'll go through the screening process. I hope they'll come out on the other side, but this is a very, very, very big bureaucracy we're running.
Well, the president of Nigeria has forwarded these three names in line with Section 147, Sub 2 of the 1999 Constitution. So he has not done anything unusual. And it is also the function of the Senate to screen these additional three ministers who have been appointed. Okay, are we expecting anything different from the previous process that we saw? There is not likely to be any rigor. This Senate in the National Assembly having proven itself substantially to be a rubber stamp assembly. But I hope they will have learned one or two lessons from the previous exercise and the observations of Nigerians, and at least subject these three fresh nominees to some kind of quality, interrogation, even if they are going to be pretending to be doing so. Now, three of them. One is filling the slot of Kaduna State. Nasir El-Rufai, former governor of Kaduna State, having failed to scale through the order for reasons of security clearance. And then he himself saying, well, Tinubu can keep his job. He was no longer interested. And now his former SSG, secretary to the state government, who served under him, has now been nominated. His name is Abbas Balarabe. We don't know the portfolio that he will be given yet. No portfolio is attached, as we had consistently, requested. Even now, the president has chosen to ignore the reasoned opinion of Nigerians in that regard. However, the two other nominees, Jamila Bio Ibrahim from Kwara State, 37 years old, and Olawande from Ondo State, with very strong Lagos connections, they have portfolios. Jamila is Minister of Youth, so named a month ago. Olawande is Minister of State for Youth, so named a month ago. So at least in those two cases, since the portfolio is clear, we expect some, far more intelligent interaction than we had seen previously on the floor of the Senate. However, my own concern is that all these ministers that have been appointed, up to this moment, the Tinubu administration has not even organized a retreat for them. Or maybe a retreat happened and I lost it. Because these ministers, some of them, by their conduct that we have seen, they seem to have no clear idea about what the expectations are, what their major responsibilities are. They may have gone on a whim to familiarize themselves with what the ministry is all about. But I think there should be a proper retreat where the government puts its own framework on the table, and there will be a meeting of minds in terms of the direction that this administration wants to go. That is when this administration can stand by its earlier declaration that ministers will be held down to KPIs, key performance indicators. There should be that rubbing of minds. I think that it's a major omission, except they had a retreat Nicodemously, that I missed, following the news, except something Nicodemously happened. But I think they still need to sit down, going forward, after almost 5 months in office, to tell these ministers, these are the expectations in your ministry. These are the, key deliverables from your ministry. And we can hold these ministers down to it. Don't just assume that because a man has been made ministry and given a portfolio that he doesn't even understand, that he'll be knowledgeable enough. In fact, what we have seen is that some of these ministers don't even understand what is called procurement process, which can even affect the performance of the ministry. We have seen it happen before. At the end of the first year, second year, you see that the budget performance in the ministry, it will be about 10%, 20%, simply because they don't understand the procurement process. And the permanent secretaries, the civil servants who are supposed to help them, those ones are more interested in helping the new minister, who is a political appointee, to manage relationship with contractors and manage what comes from contractors. So I think it's important that they have that retreat. And they should not say they are going to Ghana or Rwanda to do a retreat. They should do it in the villa there and televise it and let us all know what the focus is beyond the manifesto, which I assume many of the appointed ministers may not even have read.
All right, so we had spoken about Jamila Bio Ibrahim the first time the announcement had been made. However, the Senate was on recess, and so they couldn't screen, and so there were ministers designate, ministers in waiting, and also Ayodele Olawande the same. The new name that's emerged now is Malaji Balarabe Abbas. Now, if you look at him, his antecedents, his background, you would see that he's a loyalist, at least at the time, to former governor of Kaduna State, Nasiru El-Rufai, having served as SSG to him for 8 years, from 2015 to 2023 this year. Also, when you look at what kind of portfolio would be given to him, it almost seems as if all the key portfolios have been handed out. So it boggles my mind to understand, are they going to create a need to accommodate this new minister? Especially because we talked about the cost of governance and the fact that perhaps we should have a leaner team for the president. It's his prerogative. He hasn't acted outside the laws. But if we want to look at his background, there are a few areas that could be recommended for him. Again, most of these areas are already occupied by ministers. The first is that he's said to have served as chief of staff to a former FCT minister, so he knows the FCT quite well. He's not going to displace former Governor Wike. Another is that he's worked as special assistant to the Minister of Education at some point. He's not going to displace the Minister of Education or the Minister of State for Education. At some point, he's also worked, in his private life, he owns a property management company. Minister for Works and Housing is already occupied. Also, he's said to be quite active in agriculture in Zaria, in Kaduna State. The Ministry of Agriculture is taken. So, of course, we have seen where its expertise, knowledge, ability to manage a ministry is what is looked at. But then you would also want to see some expertise in certain areas. So it would be interesting to note which ministry would either be created for him, if he would put in, to accommodate this new minister. Now, moving on to Jamila Bio Ibrahim. Just to mention that she's the daughter of a former minister, Alhaji Isa Bio, who had served under the Goodluck Jonathan administration. And if you look at some of the appointments, and I'm just trying to point out the fact, I think there was an article in The Guardian recently about the next generation of leaders who are children or offsprings or relatives of older generations of politicians. And so it seems as if the pool is quite intimate or small, whereby we're seeing a recycling of past leaders or ministers through their children or through their relatives. And we see that in a number of appointments, not just by the president, but in other parts. Look at the states as well, at subnational levels. And so that's something to also watch as a nation, because we often talk about Nigeria being a place where the son of nobody can aspire to be anybody. And just to see that beyond having a name, beyond having a pedigree where your father or your mother was in politics or was known, there are people who are capable, who are able to do the work and should be given an opportunity. Nigeria should be a land of dreams, whereby people who are hardworking, who are diligent, who can aspire to get into serving the nation, not because they have a name, but because they are competent and they worked hard for it. In fairness to her, she has served as president, I believe, of the Progressive Youth. In terms of the APC, she has worked as a youth advocate. Mr. Lawande too has his own, background. But it's important to highlight these things so that we don't become a nation whereby it is these guys that, boy, still a recycling of the same people through their children, and it's just power handed over from one generation to the next generation. But kudos to the president; it's added to the quota of the women. Still not yet the percentage is promised, but we're moving forward in terms of having more women represented, in his cabinet and also at different levels of government. We move on to our next story. The Ondo State House of Assembly has dragged a Federal High Court judge, Justice Emeka Nwite, before the National Judicial Council, NJC, for allegedly compromising his office and violating the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Relatedly, the Assembly issued a fresh directive yesterday to the State Chief Judge, Olusegun Odushola, to immediately set up a 7-man panel to investigate Deputy Governor Lucky Ayedatiwa over allegations leveled against him. The Assembly described an ex parte injunction granted by the Federal High Court Abuja on September 26, restraining the state legislature from impeaching Ayedatiwa as unconstitutional and clearly malevolent. Fine.
Yes, so this conundrum in Ondo has continued for a while. A little bit of a background to it. The governor was away for a while. And while the governor was away for a while, the deputy governor was in there. Somebody would have thought that, hey, they had a smooth relationship. But when the governor came back, his loyalists told him something else different. Many allegations. Oh, he was overreaching himself and all of that. Then another fight ensued between both parties. Governor Akeredolu, this was the exact same way he had fights with his former deputy governor. So he's done 2 deputy governors now, and there's both fight. He has had fights with them. Now the House is trying to muscle the deputy governor out of office. The deputy governor goes to court, gets an injunction. The House is saying, no, that injunction is not constitutional. That they want to report that the judge that gave that injunction. So it's a clear case of what they call in local parlance, yam pepper scatter scatter. So what is happening now is that it is more about the interest of the politicians in Ondo State rather than the people. Because somebody would have thought that in a sane society, politicians can patch up things. Not that they are the most loyal people themselves, but no. The big question is, will this be like the last deputy governor that the governor tried pushing out, but he was not successful? Or will Ayedatiwa be able to have his way? It's another test case, just like the last incident in Ondo State. But the sad part for me is, despite all of this they are wrangling, it is the people, the poor people, that suffer. And the Ondo people have a lot of problems. There's massive problem of insecurity. Yes, Amotekun has been put in there and the police and all of that. But there's still far-reaching incidents of insecurity and the likes. All of that is not dealt with. Now we're dealing with legal back and forth. And when you look at it, The House keeps on saying, oh, the allegations. He bought 300 million worth of bulletproof cars and all of that. But you see, the thing in Nigeria is it's so easy to get allegations against someone. Once people want to push you out, they are so easy to get allegations. And as long as the House has so much powers as entered in the Constitution to be able to push you out. But in all of this, it is the people that are suffering. So why can't these politicians shield their swords for the interests of the suffering people in Ondo states? I mean, that's the formative question, because power is transient. In no time, the tenure will be over. But what do we know?
Last time we discussed this topic, I made a point that the situation that we have seen in Edo State, and also now at a larger scale in Ondo State, and that we have seen previously in many parts of the country, we seem to draw the attention to the fact that the role of deputy governors under our Constitution will have to be properly defined. Are deputy governors really partners, or are they spare tires, as they are otherwise referred to? Now, they have a constitutional rule. Section 187, sub 1, says that you cannot be a governor except you have a deputy. And that your deputy, you and the deputy, you are running on a joint ticket. Okay? So in other words, it's a joint ticket. You can't have a governor without having a deputy, in the same manner in which you can't have a president without having a vice president. But in the Constitution, you know, it's as if the deputy governor holds his position at the behest of the governor, who operates like a monarch. The Nigerian Constitution has made certain government officials, you know, in elected positions, monarchs. Now, what happened in this particular case? Section 191 of the same Constitution says, if the governor is not available, either by fact of death, resignation, incapacitation, or he goes on leave, his deputy acts. So what we have in Ondo State was that Governor Akeredolu, Akeredolu, as is otherwise known, you know, went on medical vacation for 3 months in Germany. During that period, it only stands to reason that the only person that could have acted for him was his deputy, Ayedatiwa. Only for him to return, and then all these problems started. Allegations that the deputy governor was spreading rumor about the governor's death, that the media aides of the deputy governor were over-promoting him. Those ones were the first that were sent adrift. The governor sacked the media aides of his deputy. The next thing we got to hear was that the House of Assembly has served notice of his impeachment. Now they claim they are acting in line with Section 188 of the Constitution, which is a section of the Constitution that deals with the impeachment, you know, or removal from office of the deputy governor or the governor. And now they serve that notice 14 days. Section 188 says 14 days notice. Ayedatiwa did not respond. Instead, he went to a federal high court in Abuja, where he got an injunction restraining the assembly from removing him, restraining the governor from appointing or choosing another deputy governor. But the House of Assembly chose to ignore that injunction, okay, because of the doctrine of the separation of powers. They've now gone ahead. Simple resolution. More than 1/3 of the House of Assembly under Section 188(2). They have now asked the CJ, Chief Judge of Ondo State, to set up a panel of 7. Now, that same Constitution in Section 188 says that panel will have up to 3 months. And there will be people who are non-partisan, honest people, people of impeccable integrity and all that. I hope that there's any such human being in the whole of Ondo State, even in the whole of Nigeria. Where would they find these 7 persons that will not be tainted, you know, given the circumstances, particularly in Ondo State? And in any case, it doesn't look like they want to do this within 3 months. The Constitution says within 3 months. But the part of it that you have to worry about is Section 188 sub 11, as I pointed out. They say they have raised 14 allegations against Ayedatiwa. But the mind of the Assembly is made up. Following the governor's prompting, as is obvious, to remove him. And the sub 11 of that Constitution 188 says that, look, if they can just establish any grave violation of any of the provisions of this constitution, or anything that amounts to such, in the opinion of the House of Assembly. So their opinion, since more than 1/3 have said Aiyedatiwa has to go, that's their opinion. So the man is as good as gone. That's the scenario you have in Ondo State. But the bigger question that the people of Ondo State are asking now, is that where is Governor Akeredolu? Since his return, he did not show up in the monthly meeting of the National Economic Council. He was not there. On October 1, Ondo State was perhaps the only state where the governor did not address the people on Independence Day. Since his return, the weekly EXCO meeting of Ondo State has never held. 4, since his return, nobody has cited him on the streets of Akure or any part of Ondo State. He has been staying in Ibadan. And the conundrum that people are asking is that, okay, who is ruling Ondo State? The governor is holed up in his house in Ibadan. The deputy governor is running between Akure and Abuja, trying to fight for his survival. The House of Assembly, led by the Speaker, is busy quoting Section 188 of the Constitution in order to walk to a particular answer. So that's why I agree with the view that it's the people of Ondo State that should change. And the people of Ondo State have now established a firm precedent whereby a governor can rule from diaspora, because Oyo State will look like diaspora to the people of Ondo State. Their governor is in Ibadan. He's not in Akure. So that is the other question. But I think the bigger question is where I started from. Namely, that should deputy governors continue to be treated as spare tires? Should they continue to be at the mercy of their principals who are actually on a joint ticket? What's his name? What do they call that one? Shaibu. Yeah. Shaibu in Edo State. He is remaining as a deputy governor because he has had to apologize and send people to the governor to go and beg, to say, please forgive me. Now, that reduces the kind of, quality service that persons occupying these positions can offer the people if they spend all their time quarreling. Obasanjo's second term was practically tied down by a quarrel between him and Atiku Abubakar at the time as a vice president, with the villa divided. So we have seen so many spectacles of this, and I think it's the Nigerian people themselves, through the instrumentality of the Senate, that should give a firm definition of what should be the responsibilities of persons, who will elect into these important positions. Whatever happens to Aiyedatiwa, those issues, we will still have to return to them. And of course, it's for the people of Ondo State to ask the question, where is our governor? Who is in charge at this particular moment?
Hashtag, where is our governor? But let me come back, Dr. Batta, to respond, because you are impugning on our integrity, saying that you cannot find the quality of people in the whole of Nigeria when we are three of us are here. Okay. I don't attack.
No, but we are not in Ondo State now.
No, he said Ondo, in fact, he said the entire Nigeria. And I'm like, no. We are people of integrity. Please.
No, we are people of integrity.
Yes, we can
join why will you say
unimpeachable integrity, and who are also not partisan, who are not biased in this country.
Yes, we ticked all those boxes.
Or are you biased?
Okay.
All right, I mean, just to mention that.
Or are you biased?
Absolutely correct in terms of the fact that it's the people that suffer. But very importantly is the issue around governance, and I think it's something we must look into as a nation. We've seen this play out for too long and too frequently not to begin to investigate the process on which, not just at presidential level, but especially at governorship level. And perhaps this is now time for the APC to wade in, because they both belong to the same party. And so as some people have begun to call on even the president, and I mean, the president has a lot on his hands at the moment and in the area of even leading the nation, but the APC leaders, because it's bad for the optics. In a sane society, this could potentially cost these, the APC a seat at governorship level, because you are holding the state to ransom because both of you cannot agree and you both belong to the same party. So I believe that it is time for the APC and leaders, chieftains of the APC, to address and speak to this matter and perhaps put structures in place for this to avoid situations like this happening, and cuts across different parties. I mentioned the APC here because this is in Ondo State. In Edo State, the PDP should also wade in. I mean, that has hopefully been sorted with the apology given. But in this particular area, the governor is not there. The deputy governor cannot act. The House of Assembly and the Speaker of the House are with the governor. They are looking for the deputy governor to serve him, well, he's been served notice of impeachment, to impeach him, and they are writing petitions to the NJC to sanction Justice Emeka Nwite for granting that and for ruling in the favor of the deputy governor to hold or to stall any kind of moves of impeachment against the deputy governor. So many things around this. But what it does at best is to distract from the actual job and duty of governance in the state. And so it means that a number of things will be stalled. The people are still hungry. There's biting inflation. The state of education in the school, in the state, the state of workers in the state. How will they deliberate and agree on perhaps review of workers' salary for state, civil servants? So these are the issues we should be talking about, and the conflict between the governor and deputy governor should not be dominating headlines when there are critical issues in the state to be addressed. So let them settle their home affairs, in this case, internal issues, but because it impacts on governance in the state, we must talk about it, but it should no longer dominate our headlines. Let the people and the plight of the people and the actual issue of governance dominate our headlines, going forward. Move on to our final story for today. The United Bank of Africa, UBA, the continent's leading global financial institution, is set to, on Tuesday, inducted about 700 trainees in its Graduate Management Accelerated Program, GMAP, into the mainstream of the bank. Arise News correspondent Oba Adeoye was at the graduation ceremony held in Lagos.
Full of aspirations and dreams of successful careers, these young Africans have their eyes set on doing great exploits as members of the larger family at the prestigious United Bank of Africa, UBA. They have all gone through a 6-month intensive training program designed to prepare recent graduates for careers in banking and finance. The program covers a wide range of specializations, including banking fundamentals, money, capital market and treasury operations, sales, marketing and customer service, financial statement accounting, risk management, and leadership development, among others. The program is tagged UBA Graduate Management Accelerated Program, otherwise known as GMAP. It was designed to inspire young professionals to help them discover themselves and their potentials within the banking and finance sector.
So they're going to be posted into different areas of the business, and the learning continues. Our vision is that in 3 years' time, we'll be able to surface branch managers, line managers from these cohorts that have graduated. So they're going to go into an intensive program. We're partnering with some business schools that will take them through a 3-year journey of training them for it to be sustainable continuously.
Within 6 months of its duration, GMAP refined these young people to become leaders and bankers expected to drive UBA's vision to sustain its position as the undisputed leading and dominant financial services institution in Africa. And today, it's time to officially induct them into the fold of the United Bank of Africa. Chairman of the group and the CEO took time out to interact with the new human capital resources of the bank.
Let me congratulate our future leaders. Congratulations. I always say that the future of Africa is in the hands of our young ones. And as I listen to all of you today, those of you who came out and the accomplishments they read out, and most importantly, the valedictorian, I was like, wow. My mouth was like open.
We are going to place the bank, UBA, in your hands. And we'll be happy that you will take UBA forward. You will take UBA to the world, and you bring the world to Africa.
Highlights of the grand event include the presentation of awards and recognition of outstanding trainees, participant testimonials, and networking, among others.
Being a banker has been a long-time dream for me. And when I wanted, after my NYSC, I researched to know where to be, because I don't just want to come into the banking industry. I want to be at the right place. And I can tell you over and over again that UBA is the best place to be.
I learned more about TOE, that's our chairman. I learned more about tolerance. I learned more about giving in your best in whatever it is you are doing. It does not promise to be easy, but if you keep pushing consistency and with prayer, everything will work out well.
So I'm looking forward to having an exciting and rewarding career, because this is the first time starting up my career. So I'm looking forward to growing as a professional in UBA, and just like the GMD said, where within 3 years we can become bank manager. So I'm really looking forward to achieving a lot of great achievements and impact for UBA.
UBA is Africa's global bank with a rich history spanning over 7 decades. The bank is headquartered in Lagos, Nigeria, and has operations in 20 African countries, as well as in the United Kingdom, France, and the United States. Oba Adeoye, Arise News, Lagos.